August 11th, 1999. Xiamen Harbor. Afternoon light on a wooden dock. The water is flat. A man with 1 year of formal schooling walks toward a waiting speedboat carrying a small bag. 3 days from now, he will land in Vancouver. 2 minutes ago, his phone rang, not with an arrest, with a warning. They know. Leave tonight. Someone inside Beijing's 4.20 task force with 1,200 investigators built to catch this man just told him to run. He doesn't run. He walks. Because what's in the bag isn't clothes. It's a complete private record of every official he's paid, every secret he owns, and what the Chinese government has spent 5 years doing to keep him comfortable. The state doesn't just want him to be free. It needs him to be free. He knows too much about too many people still in the office. But here's what makes this unthinkable. The phone call wasn't a betrayal of the task force. It was the task force working exactly as designed. The system built to catch him is the system protecting him. Before he could buy the state, he had to learn what it cost. How did one peasant trap an entire government? And why did catching him cost China more? Before the Red Mansion, before the 12-year diplomatic war with Canada, Lai is a poor son of Fujian province with almost no schooling. He never finished primary school. Later profiles turned that into dark folklore. The barely literate village, nobody who somehow understood power more clearly than the men who officially wielded it. In his early years, Lai built a small business selling tire nuts in Xiamen, bicycling 80 kilometers each way. Local officials demand bribes. He refuses. I know how this works. I'm not paying. They escalate. They come to his house while he is out and beat his sister badly enough to send her to the hospital. They filed a fraudulent tax case against him. He wins in court, and they bankrupt him anyway. You can almost feel the idea forming in real time. If refusing the bribe gets your sister hospitalized, bribery is not a moral failure inside this system. It is an infrastructure. Winning in court cannot save you. The procedure is not sovereign relationships. If a minor official can bankrupt you with a single call to the tax bureau, then the real constitution of this place is written beneath the printed one, in favors, fear, proximity, and price. Lai does not walk away believing the system is evil. He walks away believing the system is purchasable. That is a colder insight, much more dangerous and a much more useful one. He acquires a Hong Kong passport through a forged ID and moves operations there. He spends 3 years studying which officials can be paid, which need to leverage on top of payment, and which are already paid by someone he might one day pay better. He is not simply learning to bribe, he is mapping the hidden architecture of a state that runs on 2 sets of rules simultaneously, the printed ones that no one ultimately enforces, and the real ones that operate beneath them in permanent, unacknowledged force. He will later rebuild his home village roads, a school, and a community center. People there still speak well of him. That detail exists. It does not change what comes next. Xiamen in the 1990s is the perfect city for someone carrying that specific education. A special economic zone with a frontier where ideology, foreign goods, import licensing, and weak central oversight collide simultaneously. Everyone is being told to get rich. Almost nobody is being told how. That ambiguity is oxygen for someone who already speaks the system's real language. The smuggling is not the genius part. Smuggling is ancient. Ports have had smugglers for as long as ports have had tides, and Chinese coastal trade has had both for millennia. Lai's real innovation is organizational. He stops treating officials as obstacles to root around and starts treating them as a second staff to be paid, retained, and managed. He wants customs, police, port management, and trade licensing to function like internal departments inside his own firm, with all the reliability that implies. That is how a peasant's son stops being preyed. He learns the state's price, then he starts buying it wholesale. By 1994, he had a plan, and he decided to come home. What does it look like when one man puts an entire city's government on a second payroll and moves 1/6 of China's oil imports through official customs for 5 years without a single alarm? From the outside, Yuanhua looks like an empire of goods. Oil, cars, cigarettes, chemicals, textiles, pharmaceuticals, heavy equipment. The official reconstruction places the total at more than 4.5 million tons of refined oil, roughly 1/6 of China's national oil imports during the period, more than 3 million cases of cigarettes, 20 containers a day at peak, and 8,000 luxury cars. 53 billion yuan in total value, 30 billion yuan in evaded taxes. Lai's own 2012 conviction still reaches 27.4 billion yuan in smuggled goods and bribes to 64 officials worth 39.13 million yuan. Numbers become cinematic only when they find a rhythm. Here is the rhythm. At the height of the oil operation, a ship carrying more than 100,000 tons of smuggled refined oil berthed in Xiamen under Lai's coordination every 3 days. Every 3 days. Not a man sneaking crates through a side gate. A metronome. A business model. A private tax regime operating inside the state's own customs territory, processing a city's worth of fuel before the paperwork even cleared. A shipment does not move because one man says yes. It moves because every man with the authority to say no has already been converted into a stakeholder. Customs, police, port officials, commodity inspection bureaus, bank branches willing to issue letters of credit in direct violation of regulations. This is not bribery as an interruption of normal procedures. This is bribery as architecture replaces it. Lai personalizes dependence. He does not hand over cash and hope officials remember him gratefully. He pays on schedule. He pays for families. He pays gambling debts. He sponsors children's overseas education. Each favor calibrated to the official's specific vulnerability, rather than a flat rate. Former Vice Minister of Public Security Li Changxing has a daughter studying in the United States. Lai sends $500,000 directly to the daughter and offers 1 million yuan to Li's wife when she wants to launch a business. That is not a simple bribe. That is a family strategy. Once you are financing a senior official's children's future and his wife's livelihood, he does not just owe you. He restructures his household around ensuring you never fall. By 1997, the Xiamen Party secretary has made Lai an honorary citizen of the city. He drives a bulletproof Mercedes that once belonged to Jiang Zemin himself. He is not a criminal operating in the shadows. He is the most connected man in Fujian, and everyone who matters knows it. Each payment ties one official's long-term survival to every other official's continued silence. Every official paid becomes a guarantor of every other official paid, because each one knows the other's exposure. What scholars later name collective corruption, not one dirty office, but an interlocking system spreading liability so thoroughly that no single thread can be pulled from outside without threatening the entire fabric. But money alone has a ceiling. Officials who get paid enough can still walk away if the heat rises. Bribery makes officials want Lai's continued freedom. It does not make them fear his exposure. When the heat climbs high enough, any individual official can still calculate that cooperating with investigators beats staying loyal to an exposed patron. Greed is an unreliable anchor when survival is the question. He had bought half of the city, but he hadn't yet trapped them. That changed when he opened the doors of a building he called the Red Mansion. How do you make an official more afraid of the investigation ending than of the crime being discovered? And how does the building Lai build for exactly that purpose reach all the way to the Politburo Standing Committee without a single charge ever filed? The building is red brick, 7 stories, officially corporate headquarters, unofficially a trap with a hospitality veneer. Lai calls it the Red Mansion, after Dream of the Red Chamber, one of the 4 great classical Chinese novels, a masterwork about a wealthy family's decadence and inevitable ruin. The symbolism is almost aggressive. Banquet halls, karaoke rooms, massage parlors, saunas, twin hot tubs, lavish suites, and a presidential bedroom where the mirror concealed a secret door. The staff is chosen with the same operational precision as the bribes. Women hired on retainer, minimum height 5'6", high school diploma required, salary $1,000 a month, roughly 10 times the average urban wage at the time. Entertainment calibrated to the visiting official rank, age, and known appetites. A physical environment designed to make powerful men feel not simply indulged but understood, seen in their private needs in a way their official salary and careful public life could never acknowledge. Officials arrive as guests, they live as assets, beat by the beat. The vice mayor of Xiamen accepts favors tied to a property concession. The customs chief accepts payments linked directly to his daughter's overseas tuition. Li Jizhu, the deputy minister of public security, the man whose national job is anti-smuggling enforcement, takes payments and tips lie off about incoming investigations. Each of these men is not merely paid. He is made to understand that his secrets now live inside Lai's archive for a private vault that stays closed only as long as Lai stays free. For years, reporting repeated that officials were secretly filmed with women inside the Red Mansion. The documented version is more precise. The mechanism requires no camera to operate. Once a senior official voluntarily accepts sex, luxury, and secrecy inside a criminal patron's private building, he is compromised whether any recording exists. The threat of exposure is to leverage independent of its storage format. This is the distinction that separates the Red Mansion from simple bribery. Bribery gets an official to help you. Exposure gets an official to fear what happens if you collapse. Combine them, and you produce a man who does not merely profit from your continued freedom, he requires it as a condition of his own survival. He is no longer a corrupt official. He is an official whose survival is structurally dependent on yours. The state keeps paying these men their salaries. Lai starts owning their risks. The salary becomes irrelevant once you have the risk. What Lai has constructed, with 1 year of formal education, is what no foreign intelligence service had ever managed to build inside China, a private compromise operation pointed directly at the Chinese state. Not an official bribed here and there, a network layered, interlocking, vertically integrated from municipal customs up through the outermost ring of the Politburo's family circle. He has built a shadow government inside the real one, and every node of that shadow government has a personal, irreversible stake in his continued freedom. The Red Mansion is not a brothel. It is an intelligence facility. The difference is operational. A brothel takes money. A facility produces leverage, and leverage compounds where money merely depletes. Above them all, the shadow reaches higher. More than 200 senior figures eventually linked to the affair. At the apex, Jia Qinglin's Fujian apparatus. His wife, Lin Yufang, was named for official accusations. She denied wrongdoing. She was never charged. Jia himself remained on the Politburo Standing Committee until the natural end of his term. That outcome marks the exact altitude at which the state's appetite for its own truth stopped climbing. By summer 1999, Lai is a walking archive. Arresting him no longer means applying the law to one man. It means inviting every item in that archive to become public records. That is why the warning call is not mysterious. It is the protection reflex of an entire compromised class. Catching him cleanly required the system to confess what it had spent a decade becoming. One more day of freedom was easier than that confession. On August 11, 1999, Lai walks down the dock and boards the speedboat. Not because the state is powerless, because the state is entangled. The second time you see that image, now you know what it means. On April 20th, 1999, the Chinese government had created a task force with one mission and 1,200 investigators. 4 months later, one of them made a phone call. Now you know why. How does the world's most powerful authoritarian state act when arresting one man means confessing what it spent a decade becoming? And how does a Fujian fugitive force 2 Chinese presidents to submit written guarantees to a foreign court? Vancouver transforms Lai Changxing into a problem the Chinese state cannot solve with a sealed file and a quiet internal transfer. He claims refugee status. He says the charges are political persecution dressed as criminal prosecution. He says he will be tortured or executed if returned. And suddenly Canada, a country with no death penalty, an independent judiciary, and an adversarial legal culture, becomes the stage on which Beijing must write things down. In 2001, President Jiang Zemin personally writes to Prime Minister Jean Chrétien guaranteeing Lai will not be executed. President Hu Jintao writes again with the same guarantee. Then, Premier Zhu Rongji makes a public statement. If Lai Changxing were executed 3 times over, it would not be too much. Lai's Canadian lawyer reads that line into the court record immediately. The Premier of China has just produced the most effective evidence against China's own written assurances. One fugitive from Fujian province has maneuvered the senior leadership of the world's largest authoritarian state into publicly contradicting itself, on the record, inside a foreign court. The case already carries a body count. More than 300 suspects tried, at least 14 death sentences handed down, 7 executions carried out by 2002. Lai's defense centers on 2 named deaths. His brother died in a labor camp while Lai was in Vancouver. An accountant connected to Yuanhua died in custody without explanation. For a Canadian adjudicator weighing credible fear of return, those are not rhetorical constructions. They are named deaths on this specific docket. Then Beijing attempted the covert route. In 2000, Chinese agents traveled to Canada under false pretenses to lure Lai back. Ottawa protests formally. Beijing produces what diplomatic vocabulary calls an expression of regret, a rising great power, humiliated by one fugitive from Fujian, running an unauthorized operation on Allied democratic soil because the legal channel is grinding too slowly. MSS officers are then deployed to Vancouver from 2002 onward to surveil Lai's movements, directly monitoring a man whose lawyer is simultaneously citing Beijing's own public statements as evidence of bad faith. In 2009, Canada grants Lai a work permit. One of China's most wanted fugitives, legally authorized to work inside a foreign country, inside a legal vocabulary that Beijing cannot threaten, bribe, or override. The same logic of written rules and independent enforcement that Lai spent a decade corrupting at home. In July 2011, the legal road ended. Lai boards Air Canada Flight 29 to Beijing after China's written assurances are accepted as sufficient. The Chinese state pays a permanent cost to retrieve him. It has now made public written commitments to a Western government about its judicial practices. Those commitments will be cited against it by every future extradition target, in every jurisdiction, for as long as the documents survive, which is to say, indefinitely. Beijing celebrates publicly. Rights lawyers warn that an opaque judiciary remains opaque regardless of any diplomatic note. Both assessments are accurate. Both can be simultaneously true. He carried no luggage, but he carried 12 years of memory of every official he had ever paid. The question Beijing now faced wasn't how to convict him. It was how to silence him. How do you try a man whose full conviction exposes 64 officials still on the payroll? And what does a verdict look like when the state needs to bury the truth more than deliver justice? On July 23, 2011, Lai Changxing arrives in Beijing and is arrested. Then he vanishes into the procedural dark for months. In April 2012, he is tried in Xiamen in the same city where the empire ran, the same customs apparatus he once quietly owned. In May, the sentence, life imprisonment, plus 15 years for bribery, political rights stripped for life, all personal assets confiscated. On paper, the story is over, except look at how the ending is constructed. State media designates an open court, but only 3 newspaper journalists are permitted to attend to sentencing while others are turned away. No cascade of elite names. No exhaustive accounting of which powerful families received what. No reopening of the political question the investigation always threatened to become. The verdict buries as much as it punishes. The balancing act the state must perform here is precise, and it has 4 parts. It must convict Lai to close the case publicly. It must execute 14 of his lower-tier employees as scapegoats to perform anti-corruption credibility. It must leave the Politburo elite untouched to preserve the system that made Lai possible in the first place. And it must build an entire new ideology of anti-corruption around the case to legitimize the contradiction between those first 3 moves. Yang Qianxian falls, Li Jizhu falls. A long list of customs, police, banking, and municipal-level figures falls. More than 300 suspects tried across the broader case. But the scandal's highest political shadow never becomes a full public purge. Jia Qinglin remains politically intact. Lin Yufeng is never charged. That is not justice imprecisely aimed at. That is the system drawing a deliberate containment line around itself and holding it through the full duration of the trial and everything after. Lai is sentenced. The system is still negotiating with the truth he embodies. And this is where Lai's story stops being only about Lai. Xi Jinping was acting governor of Fujian in 1999 when the Yuanhua scandal broke. He was summoned to Beijing to explain how corruption had flourished under his watch. He emerged politically intact, and the case that nearly ended his career became the political vocabulary that defined it. Xi's anti-corruption campaign against the defining instrument of his presidency is not separable from what the Lai case revealed about how vertically networked, collectively sustained, politically shielded corruption operates. The Xiamen affair didn't cause the Xi era, but it exposed, with maximum visibility, exactly the kind of structural rot in the Xi era would later attempt to discipline and enter inside a cleaner official account. Every Chinese citizen alive in 2026 lives inside political infrastructure that exists because of this one peasant. The system learns from him. That may be the strangest compliment available to a man like Lai Changxing. Not that he wins, not that he escapes indefinitely, but that the state must structurally adapt to the vulnerability he found and exploited. Now go all the way back to the first image. The dock, the bag, the boat, the warning call. After everything you know, that call is no longer mysterious. Of course, someone inside the dragnet warns him. He is not betraying the system by making that call. He is expressing the system's deepest operational logic in the same logic Lai spent a decade encoding into the behavior of 64 officials and counting. That does not make Lai clean. His brother died in a labor camp. An accountant died in custody without explanation. 14 people were executed. His second wife spent 12 years in Vancouver, waiting for a life that ended in a Beijing courtroom. She never returned to either place the same. The Red Mansion was not a prank, and the Empire was not victimless. But reduce him to a vulgar smuggler with a speedboat and a lucky phone call, and you miss the part that matters. He saw that when a political system runs on hidden favors, those favors can be counted. When careers depend on compromise, compromise can be stored. When everyone is dirty, the dirtiest man in the room can sometimes become the safest man in the country. Once a barely educated village striver from Fujian province understands that, before the credentialed elite does, the rest of the story is pure arithmetic. Who owes whom? Who fears what? Who makes the call? Who gets on the boat? China eventually gets Lai back. It imprisons him for life. It publishes the sentence. And still, in Xiamen today, people say, "Rich like Lai," the way you say it about someone who figured something out that everyone else missed. It is still spoken as a compliment. The peasant learned the price of the system. The system spent the next 25 years trying to raise it. If this story pulled you in, the next video is about a different man, but the same mechanism. Every powerful person in the room protected him. Every institution that should have stopped him looked the other way. The question is the same one Lai answered. What does a man have to know to become untouchable? That video is already up.